Okay, so does that make sense, guys, as to how to set up the table? It's a really easy way, that way you guys don't have to think too much, that you've got all the different permutations in there. Okay, so let's think order of operations here, okay? If you're just in a regular math class, guys, what has the highest precedence?
Parentheses.
Parentheses, right? So let's just do what's in the parentheses first. Notice that I have P and Q in the first parentheses, okay? So that's what I'm going to do. My next column, and you don't have to do it this way, but if you've never seen a truth table before, you might want to start by what's in the parentheses, okay? Just like a regular order of operations, okay? Guys, what did we say has to be true for a conjunction to be true?
Both have to be true.
Both P and Q have to be true, right? So what are the only two rows that are going to have an output of true?
First one.
First one,
And second one.
and the second one as well, right, guys? Because if you look at the first row, then we have P and Q, so that's a true. And then P and Q are both true, so that's true. Do we care what R is, guys? No, we don't care what R is. There's no R in that statement. So why are we even caring about R for the next one? Okay, so these are true, and then the rest of them have at least one false, so the rest of these animals are falses. So does that make sense, guys, as to why we did P and Q first, because it's in the parentheses, and then secondly, does it make sense as to how we got that column? Any questions? Okay. Next thing we do. There's still another thing in the parentheses, right, guys? There's a not P or R. Okay, so that's the next thing I'm going to look at. So not P or R. Now this is a disjunction, which means that what has to be true? One of those two has to be true, right? So basically, couldn't we just look at the R and say wherever R is true, that's got to be true no matter what? Okay, so let's do that first. So it doesn't matter which one is true. So first of all, we know that R is true here. We know that R is true here. We know that R is true here. And we know that R is true in row 7. Okay, well, should be row 7, not 6.5. Sorry. And, boy, that's not even close. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. So does that make sense, guys, as to why we can fill those in immediately? I just looked at R, didn't care about the other thing. Now, what else should be true for us to put a true in that last column that we have so far? P should be false, right, guys? Because if P is false, so P should be false. Or let's say P can be false. Because we're taking a negation of P. Okay? So remember, it's either one of those that has to be true. Okay? So since P is false here, or I'm sorry, P is true, but not P would be false, that means that this is false. Since P is true here, and R is true here, that means that this guy is going to be false as well. Okay? So this just says false here, false here. Since this guy is false, we want to take the opposite or negation of false, so this guy would be true. And then finally for the last one, since this P is false, the negation says that it must be true. Okay? So basically, if you've done this correctly, everything should be true except rows 2 and 4. Okay? Does that make sense as to why that is, guys? Any questions? Okay, good. Alright, I'm almost done. Okay? I've done what's in parentheses. Now I just have to go through and do the disjunction that's in between those, right? So right now, guys, the first 3 columns don't mean anything. The only thing that matters to us is the very last column, which is P and Q, or not P or R. So notice, guys, how we're working with this. We're working from the inside of parentheses, and we just keep growing this statement. Okay? So just like a regular order of operations problem. All right, we said that for a disjunction to be true, either of those statements must be true. So let's just take a look at the first line. Okay? What would be the output on the first line of this?
True.
Guys? True, right? Because these are both true. So this is true. For true, false, what's the output for the last column if it's a true, false?
True.
True as well. In fact, Doesn't it look like that every row is going to be true except for which row, guys?
4.
Row number 4, right? Because that's the only one where they're both false. So this is almost a tautology. So I don't know what you would call that, an altology. Meaning it's almost a tautology, but I don't know. It's like you guys are driving like in a one-lane road, like if you're ever riding down 22 and you're in the 50-mile-per-hour zone and some jackass is going like 35 miles per hour and you're just completely screaming because you want to choke them out. So maybe I shouldn't say that on the first day of class, but regardless. Okay. Does this make sense, guys? Any questions, okay? You work from the inside of parentheses and then you just keep growing your statement form until you get to the end of it, okay? It's not too difficult, but it's all predicated on those 4 tables that we looked at before. Okay, so here's what I want you guys to do, okay? I want you guys to go ahead and see if you guys can take about 5 minutes, see if you guys can do letter B, okay? You should have maybe 3 columns for this. You can probably get away with 2 columns and make it work, okay? So do the exact same setup to begin with and then grow your statement out, okay? If you guys need some help, raise your hand. That's what I'm here for, okay? Sir, please.
What's the, like, the 2 and the squared and the 2 and the...
Oh, that's how many T's you should have in succession for that column, okay? So notice how we start out with 2 to the 3rd? The first column should have 2 squared trues in a row. The next one should have 2 to the first and then 2 to the 0. So just in descending order. So that way, like if for some reason you had like 4 or 5 rows, that would make it work. Does that make sense, sir? Okay, good.
Yeah.
Sure. It's just an easy way to make it, okay? And if you know a different way, I don't have any problem with that. This is exactly what you guys are going to see for homework. Question like this will probably be on your exam. Okay, so not trying to trick you guys, just trying to make sure you guys understand it. That's all. Somebody needs help, let me know. At least help with this problem. If you have financial trouble or psychological trouble, I highly suggest you go somewhere else. Give you guys another minute to finish up, and then we'll go through the answer to this. For those of you guys that are done, how many of you guys use 3 columns? How many of you guys use 2? That's fine. Anybody use 1?
I wrote 3 columns just to figure out in my head how 2 columns would work, and then I realized, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like I wrote it, but I didn't use it.
Okay. How many of you guys use 0 columns? That's good. Just can't do it. Okay, so somebody tell me, what was their first column that they constructed? What might be like the most logical place to start?
The not P, or Q, R.
Yeah, I would start with the P or R, or not P or R. Good, Don. So, now Don, you did P or R, correct? Or not P or R?
I did not. P
Okay,
or R.
sir, do you mind if I just start off with that? Because not everyone's seen it before, but that's perfectly fine. So you could either do P or R, because it's in parentheses, or if you're pretty good with the stuff, you could have done not. Now remember, what has to be true about P or R to be true?
Either one.
One of them, right? So for the first row, in fact, for the first 4 of these, wouldn't the first 4 be true? Because they're all true. So no matter what, the first 4 of these are going to be true. And then, what about row number 5? Because the P is false, but the R is true, that's going to be what? True. Good. In row 6, both P and R are false. We don't care about Q for this first part, so false or false gives us a false. False or true gives us a true. False or false gives us a false. Okay, so if you did P or R as the first column, everything should be true except for lines 6 and 8. Okay, does that make sense to everybody, guys? Okay. Now, if you were to go through, the next column you could have done, or the first column you could have done, was not P or R. Okay? So maybe some of you guys are good at this and you've done it several times. So you said, okay, well, I just know what P or R is going to be, so I just take the negation of that. So can somebody tell me what column P or R not should look like?
All should be false except 6 and 8.
That's absolutely correct. Very good, sir. So opposite of true is false. Opposite of true is false. Opposite of true is false. Surprise, opposite of true is false. False. And then finally, when we get down to row 6, we get a true, we get a false in row 7, and then a true in row 8. Okay? So does that make sense, guys? And Donnie, that's what you got out of that, sir?
I actually got 1 and 3 false.
Oh no! Well, don't ever do that again.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So, but you understand why it wasn't. Okay, that's fine. Yeah. And remember, guys, this is the first time some of you guys have seen it. So if it's not clicking, don't get scared. Okay? It's just one of those things where it just might take some of you guys a little bit longer. You might have to come and see me to get some help for this. Okay. The third column, which could be the last column or the second column, however you did it, not P or R implies Q. So the only columns that we care about to get that last column are going to be those 2 columns, okay? So notice that we already know what not P or R looks like, and we already know what Q looks like. Now, remember guys, for a conditional statement to be true, there's 3 ways, and there's only one way for it to be false. What is the only way for a conditional statement to be false?
The first.
The first part to be true and the second part to be false.
Correct. So basically, if this column has a false in it, the output has to be true no matter what, right guys? Because false implies true, false implies false are both true. So I know that if it starts with a false, since false implies whatever is true, I'm going to get true, 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 true. I'm going to hold off on this guy because I don't know yet. And I know row 7 is going to be true as well. Okay? So the way I think about conditional statements is, as soon as I see a false as the first input, in other words, the antecedent, I just put a true there. Okay? I don't mess around with it. Now, let's take a look. For the second, or for row number 6, I have true implies true. Okay? So notice I have true implies true. Guys, what do we know about true imply true?
True.
That's true. Okay, so that's good. And then, once again, I think we get an altology, because I notice that we have a true implies false, and we can't have that, okay? So unfortunately, since we have true implies false, it's almost a tautology, but not quite. Okay. So this is what your truth table would look like, okay? And some of you guys might be thinking, well, where would I ever use this stuff, okay? Like, why in life do I even have to go through this garbage, okay? How many of you guys like to play around with circuits and like try to build breadboards and things like that? Well, this is exactly what you guys would do. You'd buy some logical connectors, you'd hook it up to a breadboard, and you would get it to have some output, okay? I remember when I was in college back in the 90s, yeah, so seriously back in the 1990s, not 1890s. But one of the first things that we ever did was we actually had a breadboard, we linked it up to a basic program. And what was really cool is that we got the breadboard to talk to the computer by using just basic circuits like ands, ors, or nots, okay? So I'm sure they have much more sophisticated things nowadays, but it was one of the coolest things I remember doing in school, besides smoking pot, so whichever it was, okay? So guys, I just want to make sure that you guys know that this stuff is used in real life somewhere, okay? And it's not just stuff that I'm torturing you guys with, although it's the same thing with most math. It's applicable somewhere to somebody, but maybe not. Okay. So, one of the last things we're going to look at this afternoon is we're going to say, what if I want to know if two statements are logically equivalent? There's actually two ways, oh, sorry.
Quick thing, why is the final truth table, not under the implies symbol, but under the or symbol?
Let me answer your question. Say your question one more time. Why is the last column?
Yeah, why isn't there? Why aren't we doing it over like the main symbol that's sort of...
Oh, I see. We did it with respect to the order of operations. So order says you do what's in the parentheses first,
Right.
then you do a not, then you go through and do the implies. Implies is always
okay.
last.
Okay, so that just wasn't done yet.
Correct.
Oh,
Right.
okay.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
all. So we were just